the effects of corruption highlighted here. You wouldn't want to take more time to suggest who has been affected much by these effects. Definitely they are the young people, because they have a future. They have a future to protect, they have a future to live. And to that effect, I would like to submit a humble request to NPA, as we are looking forward the, uh, the prosecution to actually allocate some of the resources you are recovering to the young people and women. You appreciate that Zimbabwe has got a youthful population, 35.7%, between ages of 15 and 35. If you then consider those between 0 and 15, it will go up to 70%. And this is the generation that suffers most in terms of effects of corruption. We would want to protect this generation. I take it that this meeting and this united force against corruption will be able to assist this generation to grow in a decent manner. As we head for eminent economic recovery and economic order as enunciated in the 2018 budget, I would like to say youth engagement is paramount in terms of fighting against corruption. You would appreciate that there are young people in various sectors. Young people need to be engaged. If you catch them young, you teach them habits of corruption, they should be able to assist in this fight. So combined efforts, especially in the public education, here there is a unit that is specifically mandated to carry out public education. Let's join hands in reaching out to young people, training them, either they are in school or they are youth groups, they are associations. We should be able to train them in fight against corruption. And also the mathematical model that you were talking about, Professor. The young people can actually grasp that model and move the nation forward. So we need to train the young people. Their involvement is key in this fight against corruption. So as Youth Council, we welcome the initiative that the Anti-Corruption Commission is doing. And in both policy formulation and implementation, would like the young people to take center stage. So early grooming of young people is very important. And I'm not sure in the curriculum if there is something to talk about corruption in the schools as well as in the tertiary institution. So it's something that we may need to consider and move forward with. The Zimbabwe Youth Council, as a coordinator of young people activities and interface with government, would like to commit to fight against corruptive society. We are excited that the administration of the junior parliament can actually be a platform that we can use to publicize this initiative. Because with the junior parliament, we have got a representative in each of the constituencies, just as the senior parliament. And we should be able to communicate to you as well when we are having such parliamentary debates and platforms, so that they learn from their senior members of parliament. We would also like to work with ZAC to build and strengthen platforms across the knowledge sharing platforms. We would also want to engage in anti-corruption strategies, especially those that are initiated by young people. And I'm sure the young people with their mind, they also, they are techno-savvy. They can also devise some strategies using the phones, using the applications that may be there to track corruption. And we can give them as a challenge to come up with strategies. It can be a competition, and then we announce the winners with the application using adopted by the nation, so we can use that. So the role of the youth in fighting against corruption is cardinal because they are inherent energies, and if allowed corruption, they can take it to the root, and they can together we can make it, and together we can fight against corruption. So we commit to fight against corruption. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We have heard it for yourselves. He has highlighted mainly on the intergenerational effects of corruption. Let's help them. Let's catch them young. And I'm really invigorated by the issue of their pledge and commitment as the Zimbabwe Youth Council. A round of applause to them. Allow me to move on to Transparency International, and I also want to make the announcement in advance that the UN representative should be prepared for the remarks after that presenter. TIZ.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. My name is Faram Tondoro. I work for Transparency International. And today I want to talk about the cultural dimension to corruption. I think there's been a lot of recommendations on the legality, the use of technology, whistleblowing and many other things. But I think we need to confront how corruption has become part of our culture. Corruption is now a way of life. Even though you legislate it, there's still challenges. But before doing that, I think, allow me to cite the national budget, the 2018 budget statement. I had a chance to review it, and more than 30 sections makes reference to corruption. So the very fact that the government does admit that corruption is there, I think it's a step towards a positive direction. The government is accepting that corruption is a problem and there's need to do something about it. So from section 295 of the budget, 301, 302, they make reference to corruption. Of interest is 303 to ZEC. So 303 says that as such state institutions set up to combat corruption and crime, such as NPA, ZEC, and ZRP will be required to publish reports once every quarter giving statistics on the number of arrests. 2, on the number of successful prosecutions and convictions. And 3, on value of money or property recovered. So already the political culture is changing. The political culture is changing. So STI, we invested in a study. We sought to understand how do Zimbabweans define and understand corruption. The new dispensation is showing us that they do not accept corruption. The political culture is zero tolerance to corruption. So when you did this study, there was the new administration. I'm not so sure what their stance was, so I will not invest in that. So we asked people, how do you define and how do you understand corruption? Are there cultural practices that allow for corruption? What value system has been informing anti-corruption policies? The very anchor that you made reference to, Ms. Yambi. What has been informing the ACT campaign? What did inform the Corruption Prevention Act? Is it our value system as Zimbabweans, or it's a Western value system that we seek to adhere to? Are there practices in Zimbabwean culture that does disincentivize corruption? So policy initiatives and the political leadership at the moment seeks to show some willingness to curb corruption. But what is going on within the streets and communities? So we ask people terms in Shona. How do you define corruption in Shona and Isindebele? These are the terms. Kugura, kutiza, kukata, yet drink, number 11, kutonyora. They are abundant terms. Abundant terms. I think when we tried to put these terms into SPSs, they were abundant terms. But all these terms, I think they show one thing, commissioners. They show that the most prevalent form of corruption in Zimbabwe is bribery. Kutiza is bribing, kukata is bribing, kutonyora is bribing. But then I think the second hurdle we should confront is that we have accepted corruption. The use of slang terms sends a message that this is culturally accepted. So back in the days, of which I was not there back in the days, but I think you were, corruption was worry. So it showed the decay, the disintegration. But bit by bit we've moved from worry. It's now kudiza, kukata. So essentially, as a sociology, the social linguistic value of all those terms, it means that people have accepted and people have normalized corruption. You can't undo that with legislating. You need to invest in public education, civic engagement, and you incentivize compliance and disincentivize bribing. So what does bribery show? I think when we did a study in 2014 with my colleague City over there, about 65% of Zimbabweans say they've been forced to bribe or they bribed willingly. So the second question is, why do people bribe? Why do people bribe? And the reason is so simple. It's because compliance is costly. It's costly to comply. And section 295 of the budget statement says, and I quote in Shona, kuswera vakamira pama roadblocks in large numbers extorting money from the public. That's the cost of compliance. The cost is not only in terms of financial value, but the time that you have to wait. So the police officer has discretion to make you wait for 30 minutes. So you understand the language. The language is, if I make you wait for 30 minutes, I want money. So the more you wait, the more they leverage how much you have to pay. So initially it's supposed to be paid $10. Then they'll go right around your car and say, now it's $20, you have a missing spare wheel. They'll go make another round, it's $40. So compliance does increase. So compliance is costly both in terms of financial value and time-wise. But this is the distraction. So if the state is to get $20 for me not having a license, and if I choose to pay $5 to him, the state has lost $15. So through corruption, there is massive revenue diversion. The state is losing millions of dollars through petty level corruption of the form of bribery. But then I think there's something of interest to those who like to talk about gender. When you ask people who do bribe, I think the dominant group that does bribe is the male counterparts. Because they have access to capital, they have access to money. But how are women bribing? They are bribing, but then if you ask Miss Ziambi, have you ever bribed before? You'll say no. Because the current of bribing for women is naturally sex. And this is a hidden form of corruption. There's less data on that. So let me give you examples. It's getting interesting, I suppose. Those of my generation, they know of terms like Kuzunza Msika. So we went to Mtare and to ask people, how are women forced to pay for a bribery through sex? They told us that the term is Zunza Msika, or number 11 in Mlawayo. In academic institutions where you'll be teaching us mathematics, they have this term, 5 for marks, sexually transmitted degrees. Back then in the 90s, Paul Matavira was blind. He did a song of sextortion in Zimbabwe. Women are forced to trade sex for a service, but you can't report. Why? Because there are structural disincentives to reporting. One, if you go on a roadblock, there are 4 police officers, male police officers, for only 2 female police officers. So the policing institution is a masculine nature. You can't then go and report to a male police officer that I had to sleep with another male boss for me to get a job. Then we are told, and researchers, respondents say to us that sometimes if you report, you lose what you have gained. So if someone gets a job through trading sex, if you report, then the gains are reversed. The third thing is that for some women who are married, if you report, your husband will divorce you. We have a very sad case in Chisumbanje where someone was forced to pay sex to get a 0.5 hectares of land to a village head. So, but all this form of corruption, you cannot prove it. It's so difficult to prove. So I think these are some of the things that the Commission and the NPA need to look into. But more importantly, I think bribery is more rampant in Zimbabwe because of the state of the economy. We have 95% of the people outside formal employment. It's the Kukiakia economy. So with the Kukiakia economy, I would rather pay $20 at a border post than to pay huge importation fees for Mabero. The government says Mabero adiwe, but we have Mabero kusakuba, and they're coming in through smuggling. So those people, what they do, the mathematics is simple. They want to make a profit. So they are willing and more willing to pay $50 to those who assist them in smuggling. Then they will deny Zimra 150 or 130. The business model won't work. So there are incentives for bribing than disincentives for bribing. It's so simple. So I think public policy and policy responses to corruption need to factor all this. And I think last time we had the validation workshop with ZEC, we noted that legislation of corruption in Zimbabwe is more at the grand political level. And there is a blind eye and a deaf ear to petty level corruption. And this is the relationship. Petty level corruption in Zimbabwe is so rampant that everyone relates to it because we bribe Mapurisa, I bribe Mvura, we bribe every day. But that petty level corruption is morally justified by grand political corruption. If someone could amass 60 stands as a minister, what would deter a local government official to seek $5 from someone one land? If someone could have 70 stands as a minister, what would deter a bureaucrat from asking for a bribe of $5? So in us, police officers and others, they say to us in court, so they say a fish rose from the head. So I think we expect to see more from the political leadership. Allow me to talk about morality and integrity. We ask people, we give them scenarios. Is it morally correct to get a job through knowing someone? Would you say it's morally correct to pay sex for a better mark? And we noted that that type of corruption which does not benefit myself, it's morally incorrect. But if I'm benefiting somewhere, somehow, it's morally correct. And people justify it using terms like collective action. Everyone is doing it. So I think, and I argue today that if the current administration is so serious about fighting corruption, we need not only to legislate corruption, but we need to invest a lot in civic education, disincentivize corruption, train bureaucrats, introduce new technologies. So these are some of the policy recommendations I propose. We noted that there is an inherent risk that money has. So to curb this risk, I think we are going towards a positive direction where we become a cashless society. For you to pay a traffic fine, you have to swipe. So there's no money handling in between, which I think is good. Besides that, I think there's need for changes in culture through education, incentivized reporting. I want those who are practicing good integrity. We also try to sell concepts like mutual accountability pacts. At the moment, I think the budget statement seems as if it shows that it is only government which is committed to fighting corruption. But government cannot do it alone. Government needs synergies with private sector. Government should work with Deloitte and Touche so that they have access to some of the data that Deloitte is using. Government should have synergies with civil society so that we share with them some of the tools that we have. Government should have synergies with faith-based organizations so that people will start to love mathematics and support. Then I'm happy that the corporate governance bill that is before reading, it talks about whistleblowing. But this is the hurdle that the whistleblowing provisions will face. When we did the study, we were told that for someone to get a job or a vacant, you have to pay $100 to someone who will recruit you. If you want to get a job at INSCO, you have to pay about a third of your salary to your supervisor. Now you can't report that because the moment you report, you become jobless. Which is why if you look for statistics on these forms of corruption, there is hardly any statistics. What then it calls for is that we need to invest in investigative journalism. Why can't there be a subsection within ZEC that strictly does investigative journalism so that some of these hidden forms of corruption can be unearthed? We have this adage in Shona, and when we ask people, some of the proverbs that they use terms like some people call it Ubuntu. I'm not so sure if it's Ubuntu. I don't know. So in concluding, I will talk about declaration of assets and beneficial ownership as a follow-up to what you said, Madam Ziambi. I think the Companies Act, which is being reformed, gives us a fresh ray of hope in terms of how then can we pinpoint who owns what. So if the Companies Act is reformed and there's a beneficial ownership companies register, it becomes easy for the NPA just to go and say, who owns Trade Gold? You can then connect it to the sole and beneficial owner of that company. So in essence, my concluding remarks is that the solution to corruption in Zimbabwe does not only lie in legislative provisions, but technological, cultural, as well as strong engagements between the state and non-state sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TIZ. I'm just used to calling you Farai. Farai is a researcher, and you have seen it through his presentation when he was talking that already he has made a proactive approach to the budget. He has already analyzed the budget, and that is very commendable. And now that government has dedicated and has tried by all means to put several sections that cover the anti-corruption drive. So it means as stakeholders, we have a big role. We really need to make sure that at least we actually give the necessary support. He has talked about corruption being highly institutionalized. This has confirmed the research survey finding from our ZITF exhibition. One motorist said to say that when you are going to Blue Whale, there are 5 toll gates. So you really need to budget for the 5 toll gates. If you have a small car, it means you need to have $10. But then he went on to say, if then you are budgeting for the police officers who want the bribes alone, you need just to multiply that number by 3 or by 4. So it means you also need to say when you are having that journey, you need to have $20 to $30 for bribes. So if we multiply by the number of motorists who are actually traveling in various cardinal points of the country, you see we are losing a lot. So that we are here, you and I against corruption, let's try by all means to be proactive. At this juncture, I now throw the baton to where is Dumisani Mutombe. We are now Mr. Mutombe. Okay, he's outside. We are now moving on to the panelists. These are the people who are going to digest the presentations before we move on to the questions that are going to be asked by the floor. Hello, anyone? Mr. Mutombe. Okay. Whilst this coming, I would want also to acknowledge that after we actually publicized this event, we received various comments. People were actually offering us various advice, and I remember one of the people, I don't know whether he has come, Mr. Louis J. He actually shared with us some of the e-libraries which our ZAC researchers. Oh, Mr. Louis is among the people. Can you just clap hands for him, Mr. Louis? May just stand up so that people can, yeah. Mr. Louis, after interacting with our advert, he gave us some e-libraries, e-links, which our researchers are also benefiting. So this confirms the you and I against corruption, united against corruption. Mr. Mutombe, I now hand you over the program to handle the next important session, Mr. Mutombe.
Thank you very much. I think he deserves a bigger round of applause for the job well done. I want to start by acknowledging all of you. Today, there is no one who is more important than the other. We are all united against corruption, and we are all pursuing a very noble cause, not only for ourselves, our children, but for our country and humanity at large. So give yourselves a very big round of applause. You could have chosen to be anywhere else in the world, but you chose to be with us today. That alone should never be belittled. We really appreciate that. My name is Dumisani Mutombe. I am a lawyer by profession. and an anti-corruption activist, founder and national director of Zero Tolerance Wise Youth Trust. I am deeply humbled to have been asked to be the moderator of the panel discussion which is about to commence. We are all here to commemorate this very important event, the International Anti-Corruption Day. And we have critical stakeholders from various institutions. I will ask each and every one of them to briefly introduce themselves in less than 30 seconds, if you can. I understand some of them are lawyers, they are paid to talk, they want to talk too much, but please today, kindly limit your introduction. I will start with my brother here, who was my former magistrate at one stage.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neva Katillo. I'm a director of legal services in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, coming from a background of being a prosecutor for 14 years up to the highest level and being a magistrate for 10 years up to the highest level of the magistrate. Thank you.
My name is Farem Todoro from Transparency International.
Hi again. My name is Professor Simon Mukwembe, Department of Net, University of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Charity Matumbi. I'm a lawyer with the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, and my background is also prosecution. There is my colleague. I won't talk too much.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Proctor Nyemba. I'm a white-collar criminologist. I'm a licensed private investigator and a dangerous expert witnessing testified corruption, and also in training on corruption.
Dr. Proctor Nyemba recently attained his qualifications. I want to congratulate you on behalf of the whole House. I will ask you kindly to use that microphone which is on your table, probably the first three. From my far right, you can share that microphone, and I will gladly share this other one with our colleagues. I will obviously start from the inauguration speech by our President, Honorable Emmerson Mnangagwa. I first want to ask our panelists to give their impression or reaction to his inaugural speech in as far as the tone he has set, what he said regarding the fight against corruption.
Thank you, audience. Obviously, at once we were saddened to hear that the Anti-Corruption Commission, a constitutionally appointed body, was being differentiated. I'm sure every right-thinking Zimbabwean was losing hope for its mandate as an institution of key institution of government. But with the coming in of the new dispensation, the tone has completely changed. Hope has been renewed. Everyone is now geared up to fight corruption. And what they now look forward is to see what exactly will happen with those who are deemed to be corrupt. Everyone could be corrupt, but we want to remain the same. The president, they said the ball is now in our court and is going to, zero tolerance to corruption. You can only do it on your own risk. You can only